Good morning today and welcome once again. Today's speaker is Lalith Gunaratne from CC1 Ottawa. Delighted to have you here, Lalith. And perhaps I can start by introducing our speaker. So Lalith was born in Sri Lanka, but raised in Toronto, and I think he's an extraordinary individual. He's played a leading role in establishing renewable energy industries across different parts of Asia and also in parts of Africa. He's a very strong proponent of ethical, responsible, and sustainable business. He is a connector and has connected me to incredible individuals around the world. He's also a strategist and a writer, and someone who believes in personal responsibility and as a pillar of exemplary leadership in business. He does have interests in global renewable energy companies, the energy efficiency sector, and has also engaged in several infrastructure development projects around the world. On the speaking side, quite a distinguished speaking background, including at the United Nations Forum on Sustainable Development. He typically addresses issues around renewable energy, around sustainable business, and responsible leadership and mindfulness. He's won awards for entrepreneurship in the energy business and the solar business, including most recently the Premier's Award for Excellence in Technology in Ontario, Canada. But I know that his labor of love is mindfulness and mindful-based leadership. And he's worked with many business leaders, both here and abroad. I know, obviously, Lalith and his wife Samantha have 4 wonderful children, and as an individual, very well educated, and I know that will come out during our discussion today. So good morning, Lalith, and welcome. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Trevor. This is a wonderful series that you have started. So this is the 4th of the series, and I've been privileged to listen to the other talks also that started 4 weeks ago. So before I start, I'd like to, as I sit here in Ottawa, I'm humbled by everybody who's joined here today. As I sit here in Ottawa, I want to acknowledge the lands of the Algonquin peoples of the Ottawa watershed. And I also want to acknowledge the settlers and the immigrants who came after this and created this country, a fair country called Canada. And part of my inquiry also has been, since I moved to Canada, to also learn from our Indigenous elders, and I find a real congruence between what I learned since I was a child through the Eastern philosophies and what our native peoples are bringing forward in terms of our oneness with nature. So I want you to now lengthen your spine and take a deep breath. And as you breathe out, soften your chest. And settle into that seat. And see whether you can quiet your mind now. You probably had a busy morning. Probably have lots of things to do after this. So see whether we can quiet the mind and become one with your body. So I want to put some context to what I'm going to do today. I'm going to share with you 3 simple tools, 3 of many tools that I use in my mindfulness practice to stay grounded. I have a sacred time that I spend about 2 hours exercising and meditating, and I use a method called the Wim Hof breathing method. And I exercise, push-ups, sit-ups, I run, I swim. So I call this a sacred time. And I've had this practice since I was about 13. So I'm going to pick 3 simple little practices based on the breath to share with you during the course of the day and give you a guided meditation too, so you can experience it yourself. And I also acknowledge the fact that there are quite a few of you who probably doing yoga and meditation already. So this is probably going to be something that's not new, but perhaps the way I approach it might be interesting for you. So I approach mindfulness from a holistic point of view. So I bring in philosophy, I bring in religion, I bring in mysticism. As one of the tenets that I believe in is that we are a whole person. And from that point of view, I'm going to point to some of the historical perspectives of where I come from in terms of the mindfulness practice. So we acknowledge that we are emotional beings, right? Even if we go through a logical, rational process, the final decision we make is going to be an emotional one. Would you agree with that?
So Lalith, I would like you to give us a little bit of insight. Some of us are obviously going through, in fact, all of us are going through the COVID-19 situation right now. And, you know, that's clearly been a turbulent last, I guess, 2 months for those of us in Canada, and perhaps a little bit longer for others attending from around the world. Perhaps to start off in terms of using mindfulness to become a more resilient leader, mindfulness is something that is becoming more and more popular. Can you give us a little bit of context to this growth and this popularity for those of us attending on the call?
Absolutely, absolutely. We acknowledge the fact that we are sitting in unprecedented times, and our emotions are going all over the place. And I have been a mindfulness practitioner for a lifetime, but I could see myself going out of balance every so often. And some of the tools that I use then helps me to get back into a grounding. So mindfulness is about getting a hold of your emotions. Our emotions, as I said a little earlier, are fraught with all kinds of feelings that arise in us when we are faced with situations that are uncertain, when you're faced with a threat. So mindfulness tools are a way of getting a hold of that emotion and putting things in perspective, and then using that to bring the inner strength that we have within us to deal with situations in a more logical, rational manner. So my whole premise of using mindfulness is to move away from emotion to a logical, rational place so we can make decisions. We can make better decisions when we are having put things in perspective from a logical, rational place. So
And I know,
so go ahead.
sorry, Lalith, I know that you are an engineer by training. So I'm very curious, how does an engineer get into mindfulness? Can you share a little bit of your story?
Sure. I studied mechanical engineering technology and the nuclear version. So I found that I'm just going back a little bit on my history. I grew up, to put some context to it, I grew up in Sri Lanka as a kid in a Buddhist home where I was told a few tenets of life. And one of the first tenet was that everything is impermanent and uncertain. Second tenet was that everything is interconnected in this universe and everything has a cause and effect. The third tenet was the notion that the material world is not fully satisfactory for us. So those three tenets have been a foundation for me. At the same time, I was fascinated by mechanical things. I was fascinated by cars, engines, technology. So I studied engineering. And in my engineering education, I realized that fundamentally the laws of thermodynamics linked engineering and science to mysticism too. So that link then enabled me to carry on my inquiry further, because I didn't see a separation between the scientific world and the world of the mind, the world of the mysteries, and I dare say spirituality, because spirituality is a loaded word, as you well know, but I'm not shy to use that word because as a whole person, I bring that about. So as I was getting into the process of mindfulness itself, there is a relationship with mindfulness and emotion, because there's a two-way process that goes on between the mind and emotion. And that two-way process is key to us because our emotions are like, to give you an analogy, is like us being on a horse. And as we are trotting along on this horse, a couple of dogs come and upset the horse and the horse bolts and we lose control of the horse. Our mind is like that. It takes off on us. And we have at most times very little control of where the mind goes. because all these external stimuli drive our mind. So our mind is like a sponge. It takes in emotion, and we embed those emotions, and those emotions can then take our mind to all kinds of places. And emotions, when we think about emotions, so what are some of the emotions? Just reflect on some of the emotions that are arising in you right now in this current situation. Just reflect on a couple. So when you think about it, there are really a handful of emotions that can ruin our day, that can bring us to despair if we let it become acute. So those emotions are essentially worry, fear, anger, sadness. So we can count them in one hand. Frustration. So think about the power of those emotions that can throw us off our balance. And then think about how the impact of those emotions that are going to throw us off, how that has an impact on our physiology and our mind, on our thinking process, on our decision-making process. So for me, the mindfulness process is essentially our ability to bring our mind back to ourselves and find congruence. So my engineering background really also helps me to put things in perspective from a logical, rational point of view, and also acknowledge the fact that our world has evolved in the last 500 years or so, separating technology and separating the mind and the body. And the COVID crisis that we have right now is a result, is actually a biological response to an ecological crisis that we have as human beings created because of our use of technology without thinking about consequences. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity now, this COVID time, the COVID break that we have, an opportunity to reflect on how the world has evolved and where we have brought it to. And how do we now make amends and adjust some of those things? Because as a business person, I know the worst in me arises in business discussions because it becomes so competitive, because there's so much at stake. And then we tend to then override people, overpower people, use our position of power to get our way without thinking of consequences. So mindfulness then is, for me, a process where I can take a step back and think about the entire system. As I said earlier, the cause and effect process, as we are part of one system, when I push one button here, there's going to be an impact on that somewhere else. Especially as a leader, we have so much position of power where our influence is so strong, where we can really impact on situations on the ground without even us knowing it, in a positive way or in a negative way. So that is how I approach the mindfulness process.
It seems very incredibly relevant today. I mean, as you know, the members of our organization are all business leaders, and you know, some of them are going through challenging times. Some of them are going through other challenges in terms of you know, exponential growth if they're in certain areas of business. But that, you know, emotional state in which we may find ourselves as a business leader, as an individual, learning how to use mindfulness to move toward more of a rational response is incredibly relevant. Can you go into a little bit of detail in terms of explaining what the practice of mindfulness really entails?
Yes, absolutely. Right now, as you rightfully said, we are on what I say is a slow burn. The uncertainty that is out there is very new for most of us, because we as business leaders, we are good at firefighting. We are good at taking the bull by the horn and running with it. But in a situation like this, and as you said, some people are gaining, some people are losing. Even the gainers, there's a sense of, okay, this is probably not quite right. This is uncertain. Where am I going? Those emotions can destabilize our peace of mind. So the mindfulness practice itself then is to acknowledge the fact that our mind, where is our mind? So the first question I would ask you is to reflect on where our mind is. And then I will guide you through practice. And as I guide you through the practice, And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. So if you feel uncomfortable, please feel free to knock the video off as I guide you through the practice. So in terms of the mind, where do you think the mind is? And let's reflect on that. And some of us may imagine that the mind is within us. Mind is in our head, in our brain. Mind is in our heart. And now science shows that the brain, the heart itself is called the thoracic brain, has way more power than the mind. And there's a mind in our hara, in the center, in our intuitive center. And there's a mind in our entire body because we have neural pathways right throughout our body. But at the same time, I believe that the mind is out there. Mind is a process. And if I invite you now to go along with me on a little exercise, if I invite you to close your eyes. Now you're sitting in your comfortable room. Imagine a trip or a holiday you took, perhaps in the wintertime, to a place completely different from where you're sitting right now. Imagine it could be a beach, it could be a forest, it could be a busy urban center, pollution and all that. So a place completely different to you. Now with your eyes closed, bring your visual sense up and take a good look at what you're seeing. Take it all in, take in the scenes, take in the movements, take in the colors. Now open up your hearing and listen to the sounds. Now open up your olfactory senses and imagine the smells, imagine the aroma. Now open up your touch, the sense of touch, and feel the wind in your face, feel the temperature in the air. So what you've done is you've traveled with your mind to perhaps 10,000 kilometers away. And that's how our mind works. It's all over the place. So what I'm now going to ask you to do is to bring that mind back to your body and find coherence and align it with your body. And I want you to now become aware of your head, your forehead, your eyes, your face. So what you're doing is you are now bringing your mind and completely becoming aware of your body. And your throat, your shoulders and your arms as you're seated there. Your chest. And your torso as you're going down the spine. And your belly. Lower abdomen and your legs, and go down all the way to your feet. Now I'd like you to become aware of your body as you're breathing in and out. Expanding as you're breathing in, contracting as you're breathing out. Bringing your attention now to your breath itself. And noticing how you're breathing. Which part of your body is expanding as you're breathing in? Is it the chest? Is it the belly? Just becoming aware. Now bringing your attention to the breath. As you're breathing in through the nostril, follow the breath as it exits at the end of the nose into your body. And the breath dissipates, expanding your body. And the breath comes out the same way through the nostril and out into the atmosphere. So let's see whether you can follow the breath with total concentration and awareness. As you're breathing in, you're expanding. As you're breathing out, you're contracting. See whether you can keep that focus without letting any thoughts come in. Now, if a thought does arise, be patient with this, because it's only natural that our minds are flitting from thought to thought, and it's very difficult to grab it and hold it in one place. So patiently let go of that thought and get back into the meditation. Now I invite you to bring that focus to the tip of your nostril and watch the breath as it goes past that point in total concentration. Relax into that breath and settle in as you're breathing out. Taking your mind and body to a very calm and quiet place. And this is a place where you can reflect and gain insight, because you're quieting the mind. You're not allowing any external stimuli to disturb it. So to end this short meditation, I invite you to take a deep breath, go all the way down to your toes, and let go, and make some noise on your way out. So friends, that was a very short guided meditation for those of you who've never done it before, to help you to focus your mind and become aligned with your mind and body. And I also said that I'm going to give you another tools, and I want to do that now. So the second tool that I present is a mantra. And it's ironic that I do hail from the East, but these mantras were taught to me by Canadian Andrew Fryer, a yogi. And I use a host of mantras, but I'm going to teach you, I'm going to relate to you the first mantra. And as we get into a place of nervousness, as we get into a place of anger, as we get into a place of fear or sadness, I do this and I'm able to dissipate that energy by just breathing in and saying Om. So let's do that for ourselves. Let's breathe in. One more time. Now, if I find it difficult to dissipate a negative energy, a negative thought, sorry, using just the breath, do a quick Om. And that allows me to get a hold of that thought and dissipate that thought. It's a very, very useful tool that I use on a regular basis. And the final tool that I want to share with you is based on nonviolent communications. I call it the 4 questions of clarity, because our whole purpose is to understand what's going on in our minds. And if you think of emotion, if you think of what an emotion is made of, what an emotion constitutes, how do we know when an emotion arises in us? And there are 2 components to that. An emotion arises in us when a feeling arises when a need is met or not met. So if I'm happy, the need that is being met is that I'm accepted, I'm appreciated, I'm loved. If I get angry, perhaps my need for security is being taken away. If I get frustrated, perhaps my need for appreciation is being taken away. So I use these 2 aspects of what an emotion is and ask myself 4 questions. So once again, one of the things that I do is I breathe in, lengthen my spine, find strength in that. And then as I breathe out, I soften my chest and I settle into my seat and I ask myself the first question, first of the 4 questions: what am I observing? So as soon as I say, what am I observing, my thought process stops, my mind stops, and I become aware of what's going on around me. So if I'm walking on the street, I become aware of the beautiful sky. I become aware of the trees, the birds, the quails. So it allows me a little bit of space now to ask my second question, which is, what am I feeling? And it may be something that's percolating in the back of my mind, a sense of anxiety, maybe some fear, maybe something that I need to do that I'm feeling anxious about, and maybe there's some frustration. So any one of these emotions, feelings, when I bring it to the surface, I take the power away from it. And then I do a simple project management exercise called the why tree. When you ask the question why 3 or 4 times, you get to the root cause. So if I say, yes, I'm angry, why am I angry? And I get to another place. Okay, why is that? I get to another place. Why that? Why is that? Eventually, I'm able to work through this and then come to a place where I dissipate that anger because I found most probably a root cause as to why I'm getting angry. And then I can move to my next question. Okay, if that's the case, what's my need? So when I acknowledge the need, I bring it to the surface too. And then when my need is acknowledged, I take the power away from that too. So when I take the power away from this emotion, then I can be better grounded. I can see things clearly. I have a bit more space to make my decisions and move forward. I use this technique very often when I come to a meeting. If I'm feeling nervous about something, I say to myself, what am I observing? That way I'm able to dissipate that energy, and then I'm able to attend to what needs to be done at a logical, rational level. So, friends, those are the 3 processes that I want to do. And I call them mind style processes because in what we are doing right now, we need a lifestyle change. And that's what I am working on. And that lifestyle change needs me to put a mirror on myself. I have brought a lot of baggage through the formative years of my life, my conditioning. It takes a lot of work to unpack some of that baggage, which tends to have us biased in how we see the world. So my worldview's limitations come as a result of those biases. So it needs some deep tissue work to work through those biases to come out and deal with some of the new challenges that we face out there. So,
thank you, thank you, Lalith. Thank you, Lalith. I already realize we have gone over the initial half an hour, and time certainly goes quickly for those of you that have been on these sessions over the last few weeks. As you can tell, I think it's important to give our community a lot of different resources, and Lalith, very much appreciate you going through the session this morning. So we've concluded the first part of the session. The second part is the question and answers. So I'd like to hand over the microphone, virtual microphone, to Trevor Botkin. Trevor, if you can unmute yourself, and I would encourage attendees, participants, to enter any questions they may have into the chat bar for Lalith, and Trevor will be running the next part of the meeting before we conclude in roughly 15 minutes. Thank you once again, Lalith.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Lalith. And I think the first place to start is the burning question that many people are asking, since they weren't taking notes necessarily while you were going through. That is the 4 questions. If you could just repeat them again, so that everyone has a chance to grab those.
Sure. 4 questions for clarity is: what am I observing? What am I feeling? What am I needing? And what action am I going to take now that I have unpacked all those 4? Now I want to acknowledge the fact that I've taken these 4 questions from the process of nonviolent communications. So if you Google NVC, you see a lot of resources out there. And there's also a feelings and needs inventory, if you Google NVC, where I have one of those pages on my bedside table where I can take a look before I go to sleep if there's anything that's bothering me. So that table can be accessed in the NVC websites too.
And so, Lalith, in terms of, because I know there's a lot of different things you do in terms of your mindfulness. What are some of the parallels, or what are some of the differences maybe between what you're doing with mindfulness and, say, yoga as a practice? Maybe you could just quickly delineate some of those.
Sure. Mindfulness is a holistic practice which includes meditation, which includes yoga, which includes how we show up in the world, our diet, how we sleep. So mindfulness is being aware. So there's a whole range of practices that come under the banner of mindfulness.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. I'm just making sure I'm catching questions as they come in. I think it's interesting what you're talking about, the why, asking the why, and having now a 7-year-old. I also remember the phase where everything came with a why from her. So maybe you can go a little bit deeper in terms of how to, like, when do we know when to stop asking why? When should we cut it off? Is there a certain amount of questions, or how do we use that why tree to its most effectiveness?
Good question, Trevor. I usually find that it ends at some point, and then you cannot go any further because you have no control over what happens after that. So in terms of the COVID situation, we have absolutely no control. There's no point going any further because there's so much unknown after that. So once you get to the 2nd or 3rd place, we realize that, okay, whatever that has been bothering me really has no bearing to me at the end of the day. So let's say I'm having a conflict with a colleague of mine, and I'm basically thinking that he's at fault without putting a mirror on myself. So when I do this exercise, I usually find that, hey, I have also brought some energy to this conflict. And if I then apply the why question 2 or 3 times, I also may realize that what he and I are conflicting about, our disagreement, has nothing to do with him. It may have something to do with the process or a procedure that he has to follow, or his manager or her manager who has put pressure on him. So it's a nice way of unearthing some of these root causes to dissipate the emotion that we are getting caught up with.
So it sounds like as a leader, you'd be able to use this not only in terms of introspective, looking at yourself and understanding the why and maybe why you made a choice or why you did something, but also in terms of challenging your employees in a safe way to, when they say it's because of this, to really dig in with them and get them to use that why methodology as well. Absolutely.
And it's a really robust process when we think about systems too. At the end of the day, then we can, if we do a mind map and see where the connectivity is, where the causes and effect of whatever that is happening is, it enables us to dissipate and take away our focus from whatever is bothering me at the end of the day. Remember, there's only a few emotions that can bring us down. And if they become acute, we go into despair and we can go into depression too. So if we can stop it using these tools, then we are getting ahead of ourselves. At the same time, we have to also remember the mindfulness practice becomes an important process in this, and a regular practice is important. It's like going to the gym. I mean, we can work out every day and build muscle, but if you stop working out for a week, 2 weeks, you lose that shape. You lose your cardiovascular strength if you stop running for 2, 3 months. So the mindfulness practice is a practice that one needs to keep on a regular basis. Because I advocate to anybody who's never done it to sit for 21 days. If you wake up at 6, get up at 5:45 and sit in a quiet place. And for those of us whose minds, and my mind is like that, it's all over the place. I had to work really hard to grab my mind. And I'd sit quietly. If I can sit quietly and put the alarm on your phone for 2 minutes and sit there and see what happens to your mind. And if you're one of those people, busybodies who are all over the place, your mind will go into a situation and say, get up, you're wasting time. You'll be having a lot of self-talk that's going to try. So it's like having the angel and the devil. The devil's going to tell you, stop this and get up and get on with life. So the practice itself then helps you to discipline your mind to stop and then not react to situations, but act. So one of the things I'm just going to quickly say is that when a trigger happens, an emotional reaction happens without even us knowing. And the whole trick is, for me, the whole challenge for me is how can I delay that reaction and act? And it probably needs about 2 or 3 seconds to do so.
Well, I just want to touch on one thing that you said real quickly, because you're talking about time, and those of us who, may find that it's not a good investment of time to sit there and ponder existence, perhaps in a quiet solitude place. And most of the members that I talk to, when I ask them how I can help, they're asking, can you give me more hours in a day? And I know I feel that way. And my biggest excuse for not running is usually too busy or not enough time. So how would you address that in terms of, in your experience, because I know how busy you are, of balancing the need to take that mental break or that time of reflection and meditation versus in terms of the hours of the day and managing that time?
Great question. And it's about discipline. At the same time, it's about setting some time aside for what I call sacred time. And when I set that time for my sacred time, I can also create the foundation to get ready for a day that's going to be totally out of control. And when you get used to that too, that's why I suggest the 21-day habit, because once you start feeling a difference in your mind and your body from the time that you're taking away, and some of you are not early birds, that's why taking some part of the day and maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, giving yourself a gift of that time is for me is extremely important in these times. We have been operating at a frantic pace, and the result of this frantic pace is what we're facing right now. And I believe this is a gift that the universe has given us to stop us and to spend some time with ourselves. I know it's not easy. Sometimes putting a mirror on ourselves is not easy. And I also, add a warning: when you sit down quietly to meditate, some of those deep-seated issues may come up. And I also then say, you may also need to seek some help in unpacking some of those things that may have happened to you before you were 10 years old, which are hardwired in us. So for me, setting that time aside is chipping away at first of all, some of those prejudices and biases that have given us our worldview, because the world is constantly changing and we need to adapt. But we are also, for me, I'm getting ready for the day and nobody encroaches on that sacred time.
It's beautiful answer. What would you say to those of us who, and maybe it skews more towards some of the men on the call, but to those of us who are uncomfortable kind of confronting our emotions or confronting this in some of the, what drives us and what pushes us is not having to deal with perhaps some of the baggage or some of the scarier thoughts that we carry around with us. And especially the bigger the company we're running, or the bigger the stress of that. What would you suggest in terms of maybe confronting or handling some of those things that maybe come up when we do have time to sit down and just peacefully be in the space with only ourselves, and then there's nothing else to confront but those emotions that are maybe welling up? What would you suggest for that?
I say at the end of the day, yes, there are things that we can do at different levels. Going for a run, for instance, is one way of dissipating some of these energies. Or at the very basic level, just taking a deep breath gives us that pause. Now, when I'm sitting in front of the computer and typing away, focused on getting something out there, my whole body and mind is just tight. And there are some chemicals that come up that is going to be now keeping that stress level up, and that's cortisol, cholesterol, and adrenaline. So we need to really do something to dissipate those three chemicals. So even just taking a step back and taking a deep breath, I'm giving myself a little bit of a break and a reset. So there are simple things that we can do to begin with. Going for a walk, taking a break and going for a walk outside and coming back in. And then slowly getting into this practice as time goes is fine. Because I agree with you, it can be a fraught place to go to when you really sit down and spend time alone with yourself. Because we are so used to the external stimuli, the instant gratification that we've always had in the modern world, that we can distract ourselves with. But that solution is out there. It is not an internal solution. We need to find solutions internally and really realize the amount of power that we have. And it is really a choice that we take for ourselves, a choice we make, and it's a lifestyle change. And I call it a mind style change. And it is really the mind style choices that I have to make to become better grounded, to be a better parent, to be a better partner, to be a better human being. Because when you take time and stop the fast pace that we're keeping, we realize what's important to us. We realize that being generous and nice to people, being gracious, having gratitude, those are things that really help us to deal with situations at the core. So my practice on a day-to-day basis, and believe me, when this finishes, I have a business call at 12:30, I have another one at 1 o'clock, and it continues, and it's a constant battle. And I have to constantly tell myself, okay, and there are enough of situations that can trigger me and take me to an emotion. So I have to just use some of these techniques, keep using it. And when I sit in front of the computer now at 12:30, I'm going to do this exercise at least to give myself a little bit of a foundation, like breathing in, strengthen my back, and then the soft chest. The soft chest is about opening my heart. The breathing in and strengthening my back is to get a sense of power, because I want to be grounded too. So I have the choice between opening the heart and being strong. I have the choice between being humble and tough. And constantly we are moving along this continuum on a daily basis as we engage in business. So rather than getting dragged into emotion and reacting, my strategy is, how can I take a step back and act? Even if I have to raise my voice at somebody, it's coming not out of anger. It's not coming from a place where I don't have control over myself. It's coming from a strategic place. I'm doing it for a purpose. So that way it's deliberate action. That's why I said it's a strategy for me. And it is a good strategy to have, because that way we create a working environment, create a business environment, create partnerships based on respect and mutual respect and understanding each other.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. Well, unfortunately, we've eclipsed our time in terms of the question period, so I'm going to turn it back to David. But thank you very much, Lalith, for your generosity and your candor.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Trevor. And I noticed that several of you have been asking for recording of this session. We will be posting this session on to our members probably within the next hour or two, and it will go on to the Corporate Connections Canada YouTube station, which is obviously easily searchable through YouTube, Corporate Connections Canada, between now and Monday. Just to give you all a couple of updates, the upcoming webinars, we have one next Tuesday, which is an international Corporate Connections expert series. Chris Stradling, who is the Managing Director at Lincoln International, will be giving us a webinar in terms of how to navigate the M&A disruption that's being caused by the coronavirus, and going into a little bit more details, what that disruption entails, how it can affect valuations and selling a business, and what's the road ahead. That's Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The link is in the chat bar for those of you looking at the chat bar. Next Friday, we will return to our Canadian speaker series, and we will have Brian Edgar is our next speaker. Brian is an incredibly accomplished business leader. He's 30 years of experience and documented success in the wholesale, retail, e-commerce and distribution industries. He's managed some very large global businesses based out of Canada and North America, including most recently Tommy Hilfiger and Bestseller, which is the world's largest retailer, privately held, where he grew the revenues and actually made the business the fastest growing market for 3 consecutive years. So a little bit relevant to what Lalith is talking about today, Brian will be sharing with us his thoughts in terms of how leaders can use rituals and ask the right questions as a guide, both in times of growth and in times of challenge. So Brian Edgar will be next Friday's speaker. I am just going to put the link into the chat bar, and of course for all of our Canadian members and international members, you will receive this link on Monday morning from us, and you'll have the opportunity to register for both of those sessions next week. So Lalith, thank you once again for your time this morning. I think it was a really illuminating session for those of us present. Very much appreciate you taking the time to share some of these practices and tools with us. And thank you to all